So let's talk about one of ancient Sparta's most interesting kings, a guy named Agis II. His story is just a massive paradox. I mean, how does a king go from almost having his house torn down one year to a few years later commanding an army with basically absolute power, independent from the very state that nearly crushed him? That's the riddle we're going to try and solve today.
It all boils down to this one question, right? How powerful was a Spartan king, really? Was he this all-powerful monarch, a total dictator on the battlefield? Or was he kind of just another official who had to answer to the state, someone who could be fined, controlled, and even publicly shamed? Well, the answer, believe it or not, is both. And the life of King Agis is the perfect example.
And get this, both of these statements from the historian Thucydides, they're talking about the exact same man, King Agis. On one hand, you've got a king so untrustworthy he's put under the watch of 10 government officials, and on the other, you have a commander so powerful that his allies are more loyal to him than to Sparta itself. These two extremes, that's the whole paradox of his rule, and it really shows the tension at the heart of the Spartan system. So how on earth did he get from one to the other?
To figure that out, we're going to walk through his story. First, we'll see him at his absolute lowest, a king in total disgrace. Then we'll cover his incredible comeback to a position of what was pretty much absolute power. And finally, we'll unpack the complicated legacy he left behind.
Okay, so let's start with Agis at rock bottom. This all kicks off during a military campaign against Sparta's old rival Argos, where he makes a decision that almost costs him everything. So picture this. It's 419 BC. Agis has the enemy army from Argos completely trapped. A huge, decisive victory is right there for the taking. But then he does something that just blows everyone's mind. He accepts a 4-month truce and just leaves. To the Spartans, this wasn't just a mischance. It was a total failure of leadership. When the news got back home, they were absolutely livid. And this quote just perfectly captures their reaction. Thucydides says the city was in an uncharacteristic frenzy of anger. You gotta remember, Spartans were famously calm and collected. For them to get this mad, well, it was a huge deal. They weren't just disappointed. They were furious enough to vote to destroy his home and slap him with a massive fine. 10,000 drachmas. I mean, to put that in perspective, a skilled worker back then might make 1 drachma a day. This was a completely ruinous amount of money. The whole point wasn't just the financial hit. It was to publicly humiliate him. He actually begged them to reconsider, and he promised he would make up for it in the next battle. So here's the crucial part. They did suspend the fine, but they put him on what was basically a constitutional leash. They passed a brand new law, something Thucydides points out had never been done before, and appointed 10 senior officials to be his advisors. From that moment on, King Agis couldn't lead an army out of the city without their permission. All 10 of them. But what happens next is honestly one of the greatest political comebacks in ancient history. Agis doesn't just recover from this humiliation, he climbs to a level of power that no Spartan king had ever experienced before. And his turnaround was incredibly quick. Just 1 year after the Argos disaster, in 418 BC, Agis leads the Spartans to a massive, crushing victory at the Battle of Mantinea. It was one of the biggest land battles of the whole war, and it completely restored his reputation. That win set the stage for his next and most important command. Then, in 413 BC, Agis did something totally radical. Acting on a tip from the exiled Athenian traitor Alcibiades, he set up a permanent fortified base deep inside enemy territory at a place called Decelea. From there, he could raid Athenian lands all year round. It was devastating for Athens, and it was right here that his power completely transformed. This quote says it all. Remember those 10 advisors? The guys who had him on a leash? Yeah, they're gone. Now, Thucydides tells us Agis was operating with full powers, totally independent of the government back in Sparta. From his base at Decelea, he was his own boss. So what did full powers actually mean in practice? Well, he could send out troops wherever and whenever he wanted. He could raise his own armies. And, this is critical, he could raise his own money to pay for everything. He was basically acting like his own head of state, running his own foreign policy. Allies, Thucydides tells us, answered to him, not to Sparta. He had become a true warlord king. So, what do we make of all this? This wild swing from a controlled official to an absolute commander. It tells us so much about the Spartan system and about Agis himself. This table just lays the paradox out bare. After Argos, his military power was shackled by those advisors. At Decelea, it was absolute. He went from having no financial or diplomatic power to raising his own funds and commanding foreign allies directly. It just goes to show you that in Sparta, power was fluid. The state could take it away, for sure, but a successful king in the field could end up with way more power than the state ever wanted him to have.
But hold on, there's one final, personal twist to this whole political drama. Remember Alcibiades, the Athenian who gave Agis that brilliant idea for Decelea? Well, according to later stories, he didn't just give strategic advice. He also allegedly had an affair with Agis's wife, Timea, and that rumor would cast a really long shadow, making people wonder if Agis's own son and heir was actually his. And yet, this wasn't just idle gossip. It led directly to a major crisis after Agis died. His named heir, Leotychidas, was challenged because of questions about who his real father was. The powerful Spartan general Lysander backed Agis' brother, Agesilaus, who ended up becoming the next king. So the drama of Agis' life continued to shape Spartan politics long after he was gone. So you see, this story of Agis shows us this fundamental tension in the Spartan state. They had to give their kings immense power on campaign, but they punished failure harshly. But overwhelming success, like what Agis has achieved, created a leader so powerful he was operating way beyond the state's control. And it leaves us with a pretty timeless question, doesn't it? When a crisis demands that a leader be given extraordinary power, does that power ever truly get given back?